first, a few words about digital health. Once known as health IT, digital health encompasses the technology-based research and activities that share a common goal to improve every individual's overall health and wellness as effectively and efficiently as possible to produce positive outcomes for the delivery of care at all levels. The Greater Baltimore region has a rich ecosystem of healthcare, research, and technology assets to be a leader in advancing the digital transformation of healthcare. Digital health is receiving significant interest as the pandemic has forced people to access healthcare from their homes, and issues of access to care for disadvantaged communities, seniors, and those without effective transportation have elevated the role of digital health in making sure that everybody has access to care, again, care at all levels. This forum will provide a glimpse into the role of academia, the unique collaborations between healthcare delivery companies and organizations, and the region's support for bringing R&D to market, as well as some interesting conversation towards the end of the program about international collaborations. EAGB is partnering with the BioHealth Innovation, an organization focused on accelerating biohealth commercialization in the Capital Region. And when I say Capital Region, I mean Capital Region writ large. It's DC, the surrounding suburbs in Maryland and Northern Virginia and Baltimore. We have found at EAGB a great deal of synergy with BioHealth and welcome the eagerness of their president, founder, and CEO, Rich Bendis, to collaborate with us, not only on this program, but hopefully a lot of programs to come. So Rich, would you like to say a few words about BioHealth?
Sure. Thank you, Michelle. It's a pleasure to work with you and partner with the EAGB on this digital health forum today, which is a very important topic. And as we all know, during COVID, there's a lot of different things happening to affect healthcare and technology. And I found a very interesting article, Michelle, that talked about 4 healthcare technology trends expected to boom during COVID-19. And I think the listeners and participants would be interesting from a standpoint, from an educational standpoint, from an industry and a marketing standpoint, maybe even from an investment standpoint in a few of these trends, which I'll just highlight very briefly. One would be predictive analytics in healthcare. And we know that AI is very big. The terminology people are using within digital varies. It could be AI, machine learning, quantum computing, many different areas. But that predictive analytics is going to be an area that is growing and projected to grow. There's another new term. We had talked about Internet of Things, but it's the Internet of Medical Things now, and all things medical around the internet and connectivity. And we believe that we'll see and hear from some of our panelists today related to that connectivity. The other is future telehealth and how telehealth advances are going to benefit both patients and caregivers within the healthcare environment. And lastly, new cybersecurity concerns that are emerging because of the cloud adoption of the Internet of Things and digital within the healthcare world. So I know that our panelists will be addressing some of these issues today, but these are some of the trends that we see which are emerging that will be discussed during our digital health forum. Lastly, BioHealth Innovation is a regional private-public partnership. Our goal is to work with emerging scientists, researchers, businesses, universities, non-government organizations, and government entities to accelerate commercially relevant science and technology, which we frame as biohealth, not biotech or biopharma, because of the convergence of technology and what's happening in the biopharma and the biotechnology worlds, where they're becoming interdependent on one another. So I look forward to a very stimulating webinar and conversation with all the panelists today. I'll turn it back to Michelle to get the show going. And Michelle, thank you. It's a pleasure to work with EAGB on this webinar.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Rich. And fascinating trends for sure. None of us would say that the pandemic has been a good thing, but it has accelerated a number of industry sectors, healthcare, bioscience, digital health being one of them. So it'll be interesting to see if these trends continue once we see the light at the end of the tunnel of the pandemic. Just a word about the Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore. We are a regional organization. created in 1997 with one goal, and that was to is to market the economic development assets of 7 jurisdictions surrounding Baltimore City. In addition to Baltimore City, Cecil County, Carroll County, Hartford County, Baltimore County, Anne Arundel County, and Howard County. We're the only public-private partnership that convenes government, industry, and education around our board table to foster economic development. We're not a membership organization. We're supported by investments from our board members, and we're not a lobbying organization because we do have the senior elected official in each of those jurisdictions as voting members of our board. So we have 5 county executives, 1 county commissioner. Carroll County still has a commissioner form of government, and the mayor of the city of Baltimore. Our overarching goal is to elevate the region, the greater Baltimore region, as the location of choice for talent, capital, businesses, and visitors. We focus our efforts on the industry sectors, excuse me, the industry sectors that support the economies in our jurisdictions. BioHealth, which includes healthcare, digital health, and life sciences, cybersecurity, IT, logistics, manufacturing, and agriculture. Because of all the assets in the region, and as you could see from what Rich said about the BioHealth innovation and their focus, there is a lot of synergy between these 2 regions. And for those of you that are not familiar with the Baltimore DC region, we're about 30 miles apart. While there will always be competition between the 2 regions, there is a lot of synergy. And EAGB and BHI will continue to work together to knit these regions together in terms of what they share and how they can support each other on a complementary basis, as well as to push each other, let's put it that way, to be bigger and better as a mega region as opposed to 2 very distinct regions. I mentioned the industry sectors that we're focused on. We compile a fair amount of data in-house at the Economic Alliance about those industry sectors, really focusing on the assets. And while obviously not every one of our 7 jurisdictions shares in all of the strengths of these industry sectors, the goal is for everybody in the region to understand, to use a trite phrase, that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Much like the DC versus Baltimore regions being competitive, the jurisdictions will also compete with each other. But there's also a growing recognition that we're all in this together, so to speak, and that the strengths in Cecil County, for example, inure to the benefit of people who live and work in Howard County and Baltimore City. It's a small region. I often say if you pick up all 7 of our jurisdictions and plop it down in the middle of Los Angeles County, we would be dwarfed. So we need to act, like we're condensed, we're dense and condensed, and we have a lot of assets that working together, we can really elevate the region for the benefit of the region, but also for the benefit of the mega region, that, as I referred to it, of Baltimore, Washington, and the surrounding areas around Washington, D.C. I want to take a minute to thank our sponsors for this program, and please read about our sponsors in your programs. First National Bank, one of our board members, Olive AI, doing some fascinating things around artificial intelligence, and TEDCO, which is a state facilitated organization, state being the state of Maryland, to really assist and bring an innovation to market. We also have a great collaboration with TEDCO and hope to be doing some programming with them as well. So with that, I want to start off with an introduction for the moderator of our first panel. The panel, as I said, would or will focus on the role of academia in digital health. We have a panel of experts who've been at this for a very long time and have a lot of interesting information to share with all of you about why digital health is so important and why it is, to Rich's point earlier on, taking off in terms of focus, in terms of importance. The moderator of this panel is, excuse me, I need to get a drink of water, is Saralyn Williams. Saralyn has 13 years of experience working in the life science practice at Ernst & Young, working with the private sector and multinational public organizations, within that life science arena. We're thrilled to have Saralyn on board to introduce our panelists for panel one, who will each have a short period of time to talk about their own roles in their own organizations. And then Saralyn will begin the moderated question and answer period. I encourage everybody in the audience, as you listen to our panelists, to write questions in the Q&A box that you see on your screen, and we'll get to as many questions as possible as before before panel one wraps up and we go into panel two. So Saralyn, you're on.
Thank you so much, Michele, and welcome everyone to our first panel discussion. Michele mentioned on the role of academia in digital health. I am Saralyn Williams, a partner in EY's Insurance Life Sciences practice, and I'm so pleased and excited to be here with you and our terrific panelists today. I did want to quickly mention before introducing our panelists that you can find full biographies of all of our participants in your program materials. And with that, to kick things off, let me start the introductions by first introducing Dr. Eun-Shim Nahm. Dr. Nahm is the director of the University of Maryland School of Nursing's Master Degree Program in Informatics, a graduate program that was the first of its kind when it was launched in 1989 and has been consistently ranked as #1 in the country. Dr. Nahm, would you mind spending a couple of minutes sharing some additional insights about yourself and the program before I introduce our other panelists today?
Yes, thank you so much for a kind introduction, and I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this panel. So I think you already introduced me as a director, and my research focus is on using digital health programs to improve the health of middle-aged adults and older adults. So we have conducted, my team has conducted several federally funded grant project using those digital technology. And I thank all our attendees for joining this forum, and I would love to hear your ideas about the digital health era as well. And should I just start about my program, right? Okay. All right, thank you. It is my pleasure to introduce the Nursing Informatics program at the University of Maryland School of Nursing. First, I would like to provide you a general overview of our program. And as Saralyn mentioned, our program offered the first nursing informatics graduate program in the world. And since the start of the program, our program has been consistently ranked #1 and also graduated more than 900 students. So in any given year, we have about 150, 160 master's students in our program, and all of our students are registered nurses. And the curriculum of the program is focused on preparing nurses to improve patient care and clinical workflows through the development, implementation, and evaluation of various health information technologies, including EHRs and digital health programs. And our graduates are working in various areas of health IT sectors, and the majority of our graduates work in hospital settings, such as in clinical informatics or other health IT service lines. And our line of work is very much interdisciplinary, and one of the main strengths of our nursing informaticians bring to the health IT tables is our ability to serve as an interface or a hub among technology, clinical, and patient and family member entities. So that's a very brief background of our program. And now I would like to briefly explain how our program has evolved over time. This is, of course, consistent with any other health care IT trend. And when you think back to the late 1980s, there was a growing need for clinicians to learn to use computers because healthcare organizations started using computers for care practice. And many clinicians at that time, long time ago, were not prepared to use computer technologies for their practice. So to overcome challenges, our forward thinking nurse leaders identified the need to develop a nursing specialty that prepares nurses to become informatics nurse specialists. So that, so at that time, the nursing informatics programs focused on integrating health IT into nursing and healthcare. Since then, the program has consistently evolved along with changes in health care landscape, including social context, like nowadays disparity issues, social determinants of health issues. So after the integration of health IT into care, we started looking into how we could use this health data that were collected to improve patient outcomes and clinical workflows so that we can provide efficient and effective care. For example, can we use the data to build evidence-based practice for patients? I think, as you know, that in the past several years, there has been great emphasis on big data. And moving forward, now we are focusing on how nursing informatics can contribute to the expansion of the interoperable healthcare systems and the engagement of patients into care while we are improving the population health. And finally, I would like to end my talk addressing the role of nursing informatics program in the digital era. In the current digital health environment, it is very important to develop programs using user-centered design and empower clinicians to use those tools to improve care delivery. And while we are empowering patients to use digital health programs for self-management or other family caregivers into their care. And now our nursing informatics program prepares nurses to become informaticians who collaborate with technology experts to embed more efficient workflow and better user interface into the systems or innovations you develop. And most importantly, at the end of the day, nursing informaticians are nurses. And our ultimate goal are to improve patient outcomes to deliver safer and quality care using digital health tools, which has been really well demonstrated during this pandemic situation. So I think I can stop there, and I will turn mic back to Saralyn.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nam. Appreciate that introduction and background on your program. So with that, let me make another introduction of Dr. Kenyon Crowley. Dr. Crowley is a managing director of the Center for Health Information and Decision Systems in the University of Maryland Smith School of Business and of the Health Insights AI Lab. Dr. Crowley is also an associate researcher scholar in the global top 10 ranked Decision Operations and Information Technologies Department. So Dr. Crowley, with that, would you mind sharing a little bit more about yourself and then also your program and scope of work as well?
Indeed. Thanks, Saralyn, and good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So as Saralyn mentioned, so I serve as Managing Director of Center for Health Information Decision Systems, but we just call it CHIDS for short. And so we were founded in 2005, which is long before digital health and AI was sexy. So, but now it's kind of grown into a very sexy industry. But everyone had our research, and we're very passionate about how we can use information systems today to improve care for patients and the experience of providing care for clinicians, and then look at other health system stakeholders and outcomes that can be improved through the better use of data. So thinking about how we take design science, implementation science, and what we know about behavior and putting those together to make the healthcare system work better. Within our center, I'd say the majority of our faculty scientists are decision scientists, information system scholars, but we also have participation throughout the University of Maryland network. So for any particular project, we'll have computer scientists, folks from the School of Medicine, the School of Pharmacy. Actually had the pleasure to work with Eun-Shim recently on a proposal for oncology and using smart speakers to foster better patient engagement. But I'd say in the last 5 to 6 years, our primary areas of focus have been on applications of AI and of digital therapeutics. So we're very interested in how we can bridge that gap between AI and humans. So what is the right mix of intelligence and how do we set up these systems so that we get the sort of best outcomes, and also to avoid certain biases that may be present within underlying algorithms or data sets. Within the digital therapy space, one of our primary areas of interest is how do we personalize interactions for different subgroups that may be using these interactions, using these tools. I mean, especially as we think about the rising importance of what the social determinants of health, which we hear a lot about recently, or just put more simply, the environment in which people live, their access to care, maybe their transportation, their nutrition system. So how do these factors impact their use of digital health, and how can we take those into account when we make well-designed programs? And also, as we think about the use of these tools, we have new and diverse data streams that are involved. Rich Bendis had mentioned, the IoT and medical IoT of things. So with these sort of unique data streams, how do we apply algorithms that can make sense of this data, mention this data that may be streaming continually, and then how do we match that with other data that may be more static, such as age or a clinical condition, but bringing these all together to create powerful interventions. And the way that we operate, I'd say about a third of our portfolio, we work with industry partners, both here in Maryland and internationally, from startups who have new cool ideas to more established firms who are trying to prove out the value of their system or look for ways to better embed AI in the system. One of our good partners, Inovalon, is a co-founder of our AI lab. So in that lab, we're very interested in how we take unstructured data. So there's so much information that can be bound up in clinical notes, for example. So how do we develop algorithms to determine insights from that data? For example, can we predict among pre-diabetics who's most at risk for becoming a diabetic, and then based upon that better sort of understanding of risk scoring, build out more focused population health intervention programs to make sure that the right people are getting the type of care that would be useful. So I'll pause there and look forward to the question and answer session. So thanks, Saralyn, and look forward to discussing these topics more.
Thanks so much, Dr. Crowley. Appreciate it. And now, but certainly not least, let me also welcome Dr. Saralyn Johnson. Dr. Johnson is a technical program manager with the Pittsburgh Health Data Alliance on behalf of the Upmc Enterprises. The Pittsburgh Health Data Alliance is a collaboration between Pittsburgh, the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, and Carnegie Mellon University. So Dr. Johnson, similar to Dr. Nahm and Dr. Crowley, would you mind sharing a couple of minutes about your background, yourself, and your work with the Data Health Alliance?
Absolutely. Thank you, Saralyn, for that nice introduction, and thanks to the organizers for the opportunity to be here on this panel today. It's really exciting, and I've already heard some things that I'd love to follow up on. So I thought I would first give a little bit of background about UPMC itself, given that I think a lot of the audience may be more familiar with some of the other geographical regions. So we are a fairly large and very forward-looking health system based primarily in the Pittsburgh, PA region and in Western Pennsylvania. And we include both a payer and provider arm. So we are what's called an integrated delivery and finance system. And just to give the audience an idea of scale, UPMC has over 92,000 employees, which makes it the largest private non-governmental employer in the state of Pennsylvania. And we operate 40 hospitals with a health plan that has 4 million members. So we're a fairly large system, as I said. And in addition to the health services and insurance divisions, UPMC also has 2 more divisions. One of those is the international division, which operates healthcare facilities around the globe and also partners with international systems on clinical collaborations and also some training programs. And then the 4th division of UPMC is where my role is situated, and that is UPMC Enterprises. So Enterprises is the innovation and commercialization arm of UPMC, and we're charged with many things, including identifying, developing, and rapidly bringing to market new digital healthcare companies, technologies, and solutions. So that's quite a broad mandate. We do a lot of things at Enterprises, and our team, broadly speaking, works with entrepreneurs and companies in all phases of development, from research, which we'll mainly talk about today, all the way through to established companies. And regardless of the stage of development of a solution or a company, we're acting as more than just an investor in providing capital. We also work with entrepreneurs as a partner, oftentimes becoming a customer of that service or product, providing deployment expertise and also technical resources. And within our system, we're able to test things by acting as that living lab. So I think that gives you a good picture of UPMC as a system overall and where enterprises fits in. And then the Pittsburgh Health Data Alliance, of course, is a piece of that. And today, I know that our conversation is focusing mostly on the role of academia in digital health. And one way that UPMC fosters that type of innovation is through the Pittsburgh Health Data Alliance, or as we call it, the PHDA for short. The PHDA was formed in 2015 by the leaders of UPMC, Carnegie Mellon University, and the University of Pittsburgh, with an overall goal of working together to improve healthcare through data. So this partnership, as we heard earlier about the Baltimore region, similarly brings together unique strengths and capabilities of each one of those partners to accomplish our mission. And for those of you who may not be familiar, Carnegie Mellon is known internationally for strength in computer science and analytics, among other things. They're home to the #1 programs year over year in machine learning and AI, and also home to many world-renowned faculty. And the University of Pittsburgh is a leader in biomedical research and consistently in the top 5 when it comes to NIH funding. And then, of course, UPMC brings our clinical and operational expertise to the Alliance, as well as that commercial expertise that I mentioned comes from enterprises. So we can get more into details depending on the questions that the audience has, but I'll say that the PHDA mainly focuses on supporting investigator-led projects that begin at one or both of those 2 universities and that have a path to commercialization. And we provide resources to de-risk both the technical and the commercial aspects of those projects. And in terms of theme areas, we take a very wide picture of digital health, a wide definition, and we've had projects come through our portfolio that range from predictive analytics, clinical decision support tools, many that use natural language processing and natural language understanding, data-driven discovery of therapeutics, and precision medicine are just a few of the themes that we've seen. So I'll hand it back over to Saralyn, and excited to hear questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. Well, those were wonderful introductions. And with that, let's get into the core of the program materials, our Q&A session. And as Michele had mentioned in some of her opening remarks to the program, please do use the Q&A functionality. We will be monitoring all the questions that are submitted and would love to spend more time answering the audience's direct interested questions, as many as we can along the way. But maybe with that, to kick things off, so generally speaking, the success of digital health research, outcomes, commercializations really largely depends on strong alliances between academia and the industry, broadly speaking. Perhaps, Dr. Crowley, you could spend maybe a few minutes on this one, sharing from your perspective and experiences what, from your point of view, really makes for a productive academic and industry partnership.
Thanks, indeed. So I think there's a lot of rationale for industry and academia to partner. Within the academic environment, you have scientists and students working on very emerging technologies, applying advanced methods. But to make those methods resonate and be valuable, I mean, they have to be used by end users, and the industry is obviously close to the end users. So in these partnerships to work together, I think a few elements make for productive partnerships. I mean, one is having, in our cases anyway, is having a very strong data source to use within those programs, and that data may be developed through the course of the program through interactions with patients, or it may come from past interactions from the industry partners, users, but being able to have a very rich source of data is important. I mean, there's a lot of interest currently in developing AI and machine learning algorithms, but if the available data to empower those types of algorithms and those types of strategies isn't available, then that's sort of a foundational step for enabling productive partnership. I think also having a willingness to experiment is important in these types of partnerships, and the ability to find the right research questions. From an academic point of view, we are, very interested in promoting sort of industry and things that work, but many times we need to find what's that underlying sort of interesting theoretical or scientific aspect of the collaboration, which is meaningful, that could also result in publications. But fortunately, the publication aspect, most industry partners also want to get their ideas and their achievements and findings out there as well. So having that dual goal to publish the findings, I think is makes for a productive partnership. And I'll pause there.
Yeah, that's great. Dr. Johnson or Dr. Nam, anything you'd want to add?
Maybe I would like to add one aspect. I think interprofessional collaboration from the beginning of the project is very important. From the identification of the problem, development, and deployment, because I think innovators or the developers need to identify clinically meaningful problem so that they can develop solutions. And to do that, we got to know the users, we got to know the patients, and we got to know the clinicians. So I think interprofessional collaboration in every step is such a powerful tool because we can bring a lot of ideas and write data into the process, and also that will shorten the time period to develop innovation to bring it to the market, because we will go through the right process. So I just want to emphasize from the beginning of the project, we got to work together.
I would echo both of those sentiments exactly. I think it's so important when we're talking about problem solution fit in healthcare, because healthcare is so complex, to understand what the true needs are and what kind of solution would actually make sense for number one, number two, be effective and be able to be implemented and meet regulatory requirements, et cetera. So I think that having that expertise and understanding those conversations up front that extend beyond the research aims and into the future of almost early product development is very important.
No, I appreciate that. And Dr. Johnson, that's probably a great segue into a question maybe specifically for you. And then also would love to hear from Dr. Nam and Dr. Crowley on the same. So as you kind of think about the significant collaboration that the Pittsburgh Health Data Alliance has, kind of with this concept of partnership and collaboration, I'm sure that can create kind of its own set of unique challenges. Do you mind sharing a little bit from your perspective on how the work with all these institutions that you're involved in with collaborating on, how all of that's coordinated, integrated, and what you've found or seen to largely make that successful?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are certainly challenges in working between 3 or more organizations in some cases. What we have found to be very successful is understanding what our shared goals are. And I think that we're fortunate between the 3 partners of the PHDA that we have a lot of shared mission in terms of getting digital health research to be able to make an impact. And in this case, that's been very helpful for us to be able to get the resources where they're needed to the teams that need them and support those projects that have the best chance of success. We have quite an interesting structure. When the PHDA was formed, there were actually centers formed at each one of the universities on campus, usually right now, mostly working remote. But those centers are the hubs at each one of the universities that work very closely with investigators, learning about new investigators that have come to the university, understanding which research programs are most closely tied to digital health. And they help us with every year going through a call for proposal cycles that takes us from early proposals, providing a lot of guidance to those teams to go from what is sometimes more research oriented to something that is a bit more commercially focused or focused on de-risking specifically. And then we take those through a whole process, culminating in a pitch day, which is very exciting for everyone involved, and work alongside those centers throughout the life cycle of the project through project management. They help us coordinate with the tech transfer departments at each one of the universities, as well as other offices that are involved. And then as projects come to the end of what is typically around a 1-year project timeline, we then work again with both of those centers on what the potential next steps could be. Things like, are they ready for some sort of commercial endpoint? Are there additional resources with which we can connect them? Are there other on-campus programs that could be great resources for them? So it's really through working directly with those centers as well as through the faculty themselves that we're able to coordinate.
I appreciate that perspective, Dr. Johnson. Anything, Dr. Nahm or Dr. Crowley, you would add to that as well?
I think Dr. Johnson spoke very well, I think comprehensively.
Yeah, I'd agree. I might just add one thing as we're talking about unique challenges to sort out up front. Sometimes IP, intellectual property, can become an issue on the front end. So it's very important to think carefully about how that will be handled. In some cases, the company partner might retain IP for many things, and that goes with a certain cost of research. But in other cases, we take on sort of a shared IP and for promoting products and seeing that through and through the patenting process and so forth.
No, that's great. I appreciate those responses. And Dr. Nahm, maybe a question specifically for you, and leveraging some of the questions that are coming in from the audience as well. So digital health it's a fairly broad concept. And of course, each of our panelists have a very specific focus and discipline within that field. Maybe speaking perhaps specifically to your experiences, can you share with us a bit more on how nursing informatics is different from other healthcare informatics? And then maybe piggybacking off of that, I think you may have mentioned in some of your opening remarks that there's a decent degree of focus on kind of the middle-aged and older adult population in some of the work that you're performing. So if you could perhaps speak to that as well, that would be great.
Much. So there are many subdomains in nursing informatics, like genomics or pharmacy informatics. And in nursing informatics, we integrate nursing science and healthcare informatics science and communication science into nursing domain and clinical domain. So we kind of integrate all of them, and then we try to use those the knowledge and skill sets to improve health outcomes, and also working with healthcare vendors and companies to build a better system and also deploy it so that it can be usable for clinicians and patients. I think that's the unique aspects that nursing informatics bring, those nursing knowledge and also the experience that can advocate clinicians and build clinical workflows into the system. And also it's vice versa. We can translate the technology aspect or concept to the nurses, and we can eloquently articulate the importance of data. That nowadays we talk a lot about documentation burden. Then we can explain the clinicians what is the important that we need to document and those aspects. So I think that the unique aspect is that we bring those clinical, the workflows and clinical knowledge into technology area, and then we translate technology concept for clinicians and patients. So it's vice versa. And in regard to using digital health, I think that's what exactly I try to do. I use digital health programs for older adults who are unfamiliar with technologies or underserved population, because to us, like clinicians, digital health programs are tools. We use those tools to improve individuals. So in our line of research, we try to make the programs usable and then to fit the program with the users, not the other way. We need to identify the level of sophistication or level of the complexity built into the system so that it can be usable. That will make the programs be successful. Otherwise, it's going to sit there and nobody's going to use it. And same thing goes from the concept of innovation to market. Even though the program is really good, if they do not address the user's need or significantly meaningful problem, I don't think that can be successful. And also when we deploy systems, we gotta support the users so that they can use it. Empowerment. So that's what I think nursing informatics brings to this relationship, the collaboration relationship, innovators and academia, and also clinical area. And that's kind of our research team do. And, reach out underserved population to make their life easier. Even though it's low tech, it's okay. I think it's important that we use them and then make things better. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nahm. Wonderful insights and wonderful response to that. Maybe for all panelists, and maybe starting with you, Dr. Crowley, a little bit. So when we think about everything that has changed as a result of the pandemic, I mean, clearly telehealth has just accelerated as a result of that. It's really how a lot of us are kind of getting our healthcare delivered at this point in time, given facts and circumstances specific to the individual. Maybe from your point of view, from a pandemic perspective and maybe looking beyond, what sort of trends do you think will continue to persist or maybe even grow beyond the pandemic? And I would think a lot of that generally would assist maybe senior individuals the ability to kind of age more in their current place than having to go in various places to seek healthcare needs through a lot of these telehealth capabilities. So maybe you could speak to kind of your general expectations, observations, or kind of forward-looking thoughts with respect to growth past the pandemic and how that's really benefiting the senior population.
I'm sure I'd be happy to. So certainly the telehealth is here to stay. I mean, we saw, 1,000% increase in the use of telehealth through most organizations. The biggest IPO this is one of the biggest IPOs this year with Teladoc, and then buying Livongo at a multi-billion-dollar valuation. But I digress. So I think going forward, I mean, if you look at all the ancillary services around telehealth, those are things that I think we're going to continue to see grow. I think I'll just speak to one. I think the use of remote diagnostics is a very interesting area. So the ability for patients to get screened or have certain tests done within the home. And I think that extends also to the aging in place and aging at home market. We see a variety of tests that can be enabled by this. I mean, there's a growing use of even things like colon cancer screenings being done in the home. I know during the pandemic, companies like LabCorp developed specific sort of innovation programs to do blood diagnostics from the home. So I think the ability to move more care services to the home environment where appropriate, we're going to see that. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, if Amazon's getting to the point where they can send your package within 2 or 3 hours, the ability for a clinical service provider to have a test at your door within the day or two is not far off.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Dr. Johnson, Dr. Nahm, anything else you'd add to that particular topic?
Two things.
Yeah, go ahead.
Two things that I would add. One is I think that social determinants of health, obviously pre-pandemic, this was something that was very much a hot topic and something that everyone was talking about and starting to appreciate the impacts of. But now with the pandemic, there's no ignoring the impacts of social determinants of health. And I think it's something that from a digital health perspective, it's the pandemic is pushing the envelope on how do we collect the data that is needed to take action, considering social determinants of health. How do we actually act on that? And it's forcing us essentially to tackle those challenges and appreciate them fully. And the other thing that I would say is I think just a core capacity that relates to digital health is interoperability. And of course, one of the challenges in the pandemic is the availability of data, the ability to combine multiple data streams, the ability to obtain clean data and reliable data. So I think that that's just something going beyond specific digital health interventions that the pandemic has again brought to the forefront, and we'll see some advancements there as well.
Yeah, I think my comment is in line with Dr. Johnson's. I think this pandemic phase really, during this pandemic, really I reflected our technology and myself, because really this pandemic revealed the disparity in access, and also the engaging patients who are in remote area or underserved vulnerable population, right? So I think our IT world and innovators can more focus on how we can develop this technology to reduce inequity in health, and also to really deliver care who really needs them. But the matter is that how we get there, right? And then also the funding and the cost. There are a lot of things that I think we need to think about, but really this pandemic revealed what is needed in healthcare IT world, like ecosystem. So that is one aspect. As a clinician who used the EHR, what I found is that the reduction of the waste. For example, during the pandemic, we survived. We had to survive. So certain documentations, we had to let it go, right? And certain documentations, we had to add. Then we think back, how much nowadays documentation is snowballing, but how much is the sufficient amount? Can we use the technology to reduce that burden? Like, for example, using the visualization, can you reduce the amount of the documentation volume? Or like voice recognition program, can we make it better so that we can reduce clinicians' burden, and you use the different kind of methods, right? So I think those two, and also think about from innovation to market, the timeline. The vaccine trial, when you think about the COVID-19 vaccine, it took just several months, right? Usually vaccine development will take years, but we did it. Of course, it was under, I think, some different circumstance. But when you think about what we have gone through, I think we can do better, but just we need to work together and then to change our mindset. I think that was very, I learned a lot during this pandemic, really.
Thank you for all of your insights. Dr. Johnson, maybe a question specifically for you, and I think we probably have time for this one and maybe one more. Specifically as it relates to AI-based technologies or those that are involving patient data, how do you navigate university data sharing policies through your collaborative efforts?
Thanks for that question. So I'll preface by saying that we have many projects in the portfolio. Not all require data from a healthcare system. So a handful of projects actually use publicly available data, such as the MIMIC database or TCGA, depending on what their requirements actually are. And then we also have a subset of projects where the teams have collected data specifically for that research project, either from animals or during a research study. And then there are a subset of projects that actually use de-identified, fully anonymized data from the healthcare system. And in every case, actually, the teams are subject to the same kinds of regulations and rules to protect privacy and security of data that any other research study would be subject to. So we have them go through things like IRB approvals, IACUC approvals, depending on what's relevant to this particular project. And then data sharing between universities operates just as it would for any other type of data sharing, which is governed by things like data usage agreements. So it's not data sharing between two universities, I don't think is something that we've necessarily had to reinvent the wheel on. There are established documents for doing that sort of thing. And certainly these two universities that we work with have a vast array of collaborations, even outside of the PHDA, and they have ways to operate those. So it's not been too much of a challenge in terms of having the correct types of procedures and protocols in place, but we make sure that we're very very aware of what needs to be done and that we take that very seriously.
Dr. Nam, Dr. Crowley, anything else you would add to that response?
Yeah, I'm just saying, I mean, there's all different types of sensitivity levels of different data, and we have different mechanisms that are appropriate for each one. I mean, we do things from very sensitive military data all the way to de-identified data or public data sets, and each level might have certain parameters associated with it, but you know, we have options for each of those levels and have ways to make that work.
Okay, I think Kenyon's talk just triggered my mindset. I think that the policies and procedures around data, health data, patient data, or interoperable systems, I think there has been change, and it will change because there has been a lot of collaboration among hospitals to get the COVID-19, the data and follow-up and vaccines. So we are working on more precision medicine through the collaboration. So there seems to be a kind of working process in regard to healthcare IT policies. Like nowadays we see the Cure Act or information blocking and so forth. So it'll be interesting to see how the policies change, and also we got to give them feedback, right? The draft, the HIPAA, right now HIPAA, I think the regulation is on draft, I think. So, you know, we need to participate in those comment periods so that we can make things better, I think. Yeah.
No, I appreciate all of that. And I know we're on a tight program schedule. So to keep us on track, maybe what we can do is just have kind of a 1-minute closing comment from each of you from our audience to cover anything that you'd like to convey. But maybe as part of those comments, one of the things you could speak to is sort of thinking forward in terms of what do you believe are some of the forthcoming or really hot areas of research in the space of digital health. So with that, I'll leave it to the three of you to provide your closing comments, and we'll look forward to thanking you for your time shortly.
Okay, well, I'll just mention, I think that area of interaction of how do we realize the value from AI, which is being proposed across the market. I think there's a need to upskill workers and professionals and senior leaders so that they can appropriately de-risk projects, be able to develop strategies that can appropriately use AI, and then create a culture that makes for an effective use of these systems. And I didn't add earlier, so I'll do a quick plug. We have an AI leadership for healthcare professional education program that we're launching with our first cohort in May that has targeted those issues. So for healthcare industry individuals who are trying to get sort of a managerial perspective, not necessarily deep into the coding, but from the strategic managerial perspective of how to build, operate, implement, be strategic about running AI in healthcare programs. So that's something that we're very excited about. And then finally, as these AI investments propagate, having ways to appropriately evaluate that they are not only providing the correct clinical outcomes, but are they doing so in a sort of culturally and socially appropriate way? Are we making sure that some biases that may have existed in how data sets may have been created over the last 30 years, are we not propagating those biases in our future programs?
Point.
Thank you.
Okay, so maybe I will go next. I would like to address the importance of looking at health IT world as an ecosystem within social context. I think because at the end of the day, what we do, innovation, is to improve well-being of people, and science advancement should be focused on the human race. I think it's kind of wide, but I think it's just that looking at the healthcare IT ecosystem to get there, I think interprofessional collaboration is very important. And from that regard, I really appreciate Michele's efforts to pull us together and raise the awareness of social social issues, disparity, and then access issues, because this is something that we need to target. And also the other one aspect that I want to emphasize, the importance of policy. I think it is very important to change things, to change the system, or to move forward. I think that we informaticians should be more active in policy development, make sure that our voices are heard when there is a the draft period, the public comment periods, then make sure that we can serve as an advocate of our patients or the IT group, so that all those different aspects can be incorporated into the policies, because those policies will decide funding decision too, right? So I think those 2 points, I think I would like to emphasize.
I would say that I think in terms of areas that we might see things going, I think a big one is going to be mental health, and that's partly driven by all of the data that's come out during the pandemic, and that there are so many opportunities to likely use digital health interventions in various ways to improve outcomes and just daily life in a lot of situations. More broadly than that, I think as we see more and more AI, specifically tools and solutions being used in clinical settings, there are just going to be more of these questions and conversations, as Dr. Crowley said, around bias, around explainability and understanding of what models are actually proposing and how to interpret that. And I'm glad to learn and hear more on this panel from both of my fellow panelists about all of the education that's going on to not only, alongside these models coming into the market, as well as that have folks in those clinical positions understanding more about what's going on behind the scenes and how to use them effectively.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your remarks, Dr. Nam, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Crowley. We sincerely appreciate your time. The work that you're doing is so critically important. So thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing all of your insights, your experiences, and your guidance to the audience. So with that, Michele, maybe I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Saralyn. Thank you, Dr. Crowley, Dr. Nam, and Dr. Johnson. I had the pleasure of interacting with Kenyon and Eun-Shim in the past. And great to get to know you, Zariel, and beware that this is an industry sector that the Economic Alliance is very interested in. So I'm sure I'll be back to you at some point in the future for additional panels, for input, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you all very much. And with that, I will turn it over to Rich Bendis and panel number 2. Thank you all very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Michele. And while we get our panelists lined up here, I think that you're going to find the second panel equally stimulating to the first panel. We're going to be talking about digital health in healthcare. We have some excellent panelists, and it's really different perspectives. We have one from a payer perspective, one from a healthcare provider perspective, and another panelist who's a digital health entrepreneur helping to serve the industry. So that's going to be a very interesting panel. We have a great moderator to lead us off on that, and he's a good friend of BioHealth Innovation as he's one of our board members. But we have Dr. Jürgen Klenk, who's a partner and precision medicine lead at Deloitte Consulting, who will be the moderator for this panel. He's a PhD mathematician responsible for data science and AI across the federal health sector, focusing on biomedical and clinical research. And basically, his work spans several fields, including AI, semantics, and software engineering. He's applied concepts from these fields to topics such as precision medicine, clinical trials, optimization, regulatory science, and health outcomes research. So very broad and deep background into the AI world and digital health world. With that, Dr. Klenk, welcome to the webinar, and the panelists are yours.
Thank you, Rich. Really appreciate the kind introduction. Also, thanks to you and Michele for inviting me to moderate our second panel today. I can't get a visual of Ricardo, so I'm not sure what's happening there, but I guess we'll start anyway. So welcome.
Here, Jürgen. I'm just having some trouble with my camera.
Oh, okay. All right. So we have you in audio. Great. No problem. So welcome again to the audience, also to our second panel here of the Digital Health Forum. This one is focused on digital health in healthcare. So as Rich said already, my name is Jürgen Klenk. I'm a partner in Deloitte's Federal Health business. I lead our work in health analytics, data science, and AI. And I am indeed happy to be a member of the board of BHI as well, where I have the pleasure of working closely with Rich. So we have another great panel here together, as Rich already said, representatives from provider, payer, and startup communities. And as before, you will find detailed biographies of all the panelists in the accompanying program. So with that, we'll jump right in, and I'll ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and provide their opening remarks on their views of digital health in the healthcare field. We'll start with Ricardo Johnson. Ricardo is head of Healthworks and senior vice president of corporate development for CareFirst, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Now, Healthworks is a venture capital, corporate development, and commercialization arm of CareFirst. And with that, Ricardo, would you share a few more details about yourself, your organization, and your work in digital health?
Sure. Thanks, Jürgen. Just to confirm, can you hear me well?
Yep.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Really thank you to the EAGB for pulling us all together and really focusing on healthcare innovation and digital health innovation. So as Jürgen said, so I've been at CareFirst for about 9 years in different roles. I'm an attorney by training and moved into Healthworks about 2.5 years ago. We started Healthworks, and we started it for a couple of different reasons. We originally started it because we saw a lot of companies that would come to us for either a coverage decision in the diagnostic space or a contract in the digital health space that we would look at, a year or 2 years from the time that we first saw them, and they wouldn't be there anymore, or they would be significantly changed from the value proposition we thought they originally offered. And a lot of it was because they didn't figure out how to navigate the payer ecosystem and sort of what their reimbursement strategy should be. And so we started Healthworks initially to help startups find their path around the payer. And what we've grown to do and what now is really sort of become the innovation and investment arm of CareFirst. So CareFirst is the largest insurer in the region, and we have a few different areas within Healthworks, all focused toward being on the cusp of innovation and digitization in healthcare and consumerism in healthcare to provide better affordability, better quality, better equity in healthcare. And so what we have I'll start with what we call the Healthworks Hub, which we're building out now. The first sort of marquee partnership within the Healthworks Hub is an incubator that we're actually partnering with LifeBridge health system called 1501 Health. And the Healthworks Hub is intended to be a place where both virtually and physically, where we can influence and be what I like to call a piazza of healthcare innovation, right? Really connecting people, connecting startups to the resources that they use, to partners like LifeBridge and providers, to regulators, to policy experts. And so we're building out that unit within Healthworks. And then the core of Healthworks really is a drive to solve problems that payers have, and more importantly, that our members have. And so we have an innovation team that is dedicated to solving prioritized problems in our ecosystem, and that innovation team is looking to find the optimal solution to that problem. And once the team consults with internal experts, external experts, we're doing ethnographic research and secondary research. We come upon a solution, and then we use the other areas of the ecosystem, of the Healthworks ecosystem, to think about how we implement that solution. So within our ecosystem, we exercise corporate venture capital. We invest in healthcare startups, healthcare services, digital health companies that are helping the companies see around the corner of healthcare. And we're looking for companies that are aligned with our strategic goals, right? So that are, we have about a few core areas where we're looking to serve underserved populations and really help digital health get expanded into underserved populations. And care, what we call, care everywhere, which has really been accelerated in the pandemic, but figuring out how do you begin to, for lack of a better word, decant a lot of the services that right now happen in inconvenient places to be able to happen in any mode of healthcare. And so our venture capital team, they also focus on sort of consumerism and health, and we're investing in companies. We're taking $100 million over the next 3 years, 3 to 4 years, and investing in healthcare technology companies. Within Healthworks, we also have corporate development, strategic partnerships with larger companies. So if the problem that we're trying to solve is real-time payment adjudication, let's say you go to your pharmacist, you understand how much you have to pay, whether it's you think it's a lot or a little, you know exactly how much you have to pay. You pay it, you get your prescription. You go to your doctor's office, you have to stay in a hospital. You have relatively no idea exactly how much you're going to pay and what that costs. And so that's a problem that we're trying to solve within the healthcare system. And it may be a problem from a partnership perspective that Visa solves something in the financial services space. And so we recognize that we cannot solve the problems in healthcare alone. Plenty of people have tried to do it. Plenty of people have failed. I'm sure we'll fail a few times. We hope we succeed a little bit more than we fail. But there's a drive for us to create meaningful partnerships and doing that through corporate development and our corporate development lens. And then our commercialization team, which we've begun to exercise and have some things in stealth mode right now, where we said, well, what happens when there's not a startup that we can potentially partner with, right? We would partner with them, nurture them. Hopefully they have a product that might be 40% of the way there, and we can help bring it to market. But what happens if there's nothing in the market? There's no startup, there's no larger company that we think we can partner with. Then we should really think about building these things, these digital health companies, these digital solutions ourselves. And our commercialization team, a commercialization arm of Healthworks does that and begins to build products and solutions that we hope to expand into the market. And so for us, healthcare innovation, digital health innovation is incredibly important. It's at the core of what Healthworks does. It's at the core of where we want to take this 85-year-old company of Blue Cross Blue Shield and move it into the future of healthcare. So that's a little bit more about me, a little bit more about Healthworks, and then I'm sure we'll talk more generally as we move along.
Yes, thanks, Ricardo. We'll certainly explore a few more of those amazing programs that you just outlined there for us briefly in your introductory remarks. We'll move on to Puthik Chatterjee, and Puthik is the Executive Director of Innovation and Research for LifeBridge Health. LifeBridge Health is one of the largest and most comprehensive providers of health-related services to the people of the greater Baltimore region. Puthik, would you like to share more details about yourself and also your organization and your work in digital health?
Sure. Thank you, Jürgen, and thank you to Michele and EAGB for featuring LifeBridge Health Innovation on this panel on digital health today. Very happy to be here. So in our function as the innovation department for LifeBridge Health, we serve as the front door for digital health startups that are looking to enter the clinical space. So we are responsible for vetting and selecting the most high-performing, high-potential technologies that can be implemented in a clinical setting. And typically how we do that is through 6-month or year-long pilots and serving as the introduction to clinical chairs and administrative leaders within our health system. So LifeBridge Health has now grown to 5 hospitals, and we have around 13,000 employees, and we represent the comprehensive continuum of care from inpatient, outpatient, and post-acute care as well. So the advantage that provides to us as a community health system is that there's many vantage points for introducing new technologies. Prior to the pandemic, I would say our biggest focus areas within digital health were really around patient experience and patient access. And the third area was around clinical decision-making and using AI and machine learning to help improve the decision-making process and reduce the burden on our physicians. With COVID-19 and the pandemic in 2020, the world completely changed. And as a health system, we were on the front lines of providing care for our COVID patients here in Baltimore, Maryland, and also for all the other patients during this time as well, and trying to make sure that all of our clinicians and non-clinical employees were safe and healthy during this time and in this environment. So we had to really pivot in significant ways to utilize the digital health technologies that we had experience with to try to protect our clinicians and our employees and keep our patients safe as well. So it was an incredibly challenging time, but also a time of tremendous acceleration and opportunity, particularly with telemedicine, as well as remote patient monitoring platforms, as patients were staying at home more and still needed access and communication with their clinical teams. So our innovation team has never been busier as much as we were in 2020 and 2021. And I'm hopeful that we can see a maturation and next level in telemedicine, remote patient monitoring, and AI and machine learning as well, as we take the lessons learned from the last year that was so pivotal and really provide patient care to improve outcomes, improve experience and access. The other thing that changed, to echo Ricardo from Healthworks and Care First, was with the pandemic last year, we really started to focus more on the social determinants of health because of the pandemic, and how in Baltimore and Maryland, across the country, we realized that the pandemic is affecting different populations in different ways. I think that's always been the case in healthcare, but it really came to light last year. So we launched several initiatives, such as our community mobile clinic effort to take vaccines now and previously COVID testing out into the community for those who may not be able to access our testing centers or our vaccine efforts as well. So it's been very gratifying to me to see how we can use digital health in new ways to really cross the digital divide and make sure that all patients in our community are being taken care of.
Thanks, Pratik. That's really interesting how you create that connection to help the minorities and underserved also with digital health and trying to achieve equity there. I think that's an important topic. We may touch back on that a little bit later again in more detail to learn how you're actually doing it. So last but not least, Nate Weiner, who is co-founder of Avana Health and also head of EHR at Amalgam RX. Now, the reason he has 2 hats is because Avana was recently acquired by Amalgam RX earlier this year. So congratulations on that. Amalgam RX is a company that creates digital medicine products and patient support programs to increase access, improve adherence, strengthen outcomes, and also reduce cost of care. So Nate, would you like to share a little bit more details about yourself, also your old and your new organization perhaps, and a little bit about your personal work in digital health?
Cool, yeah, thank you. And this is such a cool panel to get all different sides of kind of the ecosystem. And so my background is, started Avana Health about 7 years ago. So we actually we were in a bunch of labs at Johns Hopkins, came up with a bunch of kind of guidelines and patient safety algorithms, and we saw that they were saving, lives and hundreds of millions of dollars. But the way that you transferred, that information was a paper checklist. And then at the same time, we were part of kind of the EHR install team, at Hopkins, and we saw, was there a way that you could get these new algorithms, into the EHR? So we joined a program called Dream It Health about 6-7 years ago. It was kind of a collaboration between BHI and Johns Hopkins and Dream It and some others. And it was kind of an opportunity to take some seed funding and really start, building a company. And so, it's been great in the Baltimore ecosystem, having, a plethora of health systems to kind of bounce ideas off of. I had the chance of working with Hopkins and LifeBridge and University of Maryland, kind of, work with physicians there to understand how to work in workflow. We've had support from the ecosystem, on the legal side, and as well as on the financing side, from BHI, had introductions to VCs that eventually turned into fundraising and otherwise. And so from a company perspective, we spent years understanding how do you interact with the medical record systems. As mentioned before, interoperability is a big thing. It took us quite a few years to get approved and into a system. And then, I still remember it probably took 3 years to get the first patient that, our system helped. And then, a year later, we were helping, a new patient every day. And now, here we are many years later where we're helping, patients every second. So millions of patients go through our system. We have many algorithms rated around quality of care, kind of prices of care, helping get on the right costs, medication, procedure, do a lot with patient safety and the opioid epidemic. And so, we're fortunate that, when we started, we were signing up a new health system, every month or so. And now, with the adoption of additional tools, we've been able to sign up a new health system every single day. And it's been great kind of with digital health. It takes time to get in the door, but once you're in, you can really scale rapidly. And then recently, as you mentioned, one of my mentors said, if you can get on a rocket ship, get on. And so we recently were acquired actually in January by a company called Amalgam RX, which is the founders of WellDoc, which is familiar in the Baltimore ecosystem. So another, Baltimore-based company, they specialize in creating kind of applications that you prescribe alongside, medications or otherwise, helping with diabetes and cancer and a few others. And they've been growing incredibly fast, and we're seeing this kind of adoption of digital tools that 5 years ago it was unheard of, but now getting prescribed an iPhone app it's pretty cool. And so seeing a lot of very cool things in the healthcare ecosystem, and very cool to see where it goes from here.
Outstanding. Nate, that's really interesting that you did the whole soup to nuts experience here in the region, and took advantage of everything that the region had to offer also to get you to where you are today. So I think we can explore that a little bit further. I may be able to switch over to what Ricardo mentioned in his opening remarks, which is your joint venture with Pratik, and which is called 1501 Health, this incubator program between LifeBridge and Healthworks. Could you talk a little bit more about what that is, what kind of startups and innovations you have funded already, and what kind of impact you've had in the startup community? And any one of you, whoever wants to go first.
I'll give a quick 25 seconds so people tell me where I'm wrong. But so far, because of the pandemic, we postponed launching a bit, so we have not launched yet. We have a selection process that is underway right now. We received a number of applications for the incubator from across the country, but we're still in the process of selecting the first year cohort. Hope to have that done in early Q2 to launch to launch the program mid this year. And so, but to talk to you a little bit about we have companies that we thought going into this that we could, as a payer and a provider, work with companies that, quite frankly, have in the early stages of what they're doing, a lot of difficulty navigating both of those ecosystems, and that with a payer and a provider coming to the table, providing mentorship, providing capital, to help these startups that have great management teams and high potential for their solutions to actually make an impact in the lives of people in our region and in healthcare in general, that we should play a part. And we looked around for partners from the provider side. LifeBridge was our first choice. They said yes, and we began this process. So we have physical space that we have developed in the Canton area of Baltimore, where they will be sharing, the startups will be sharing physical space with both LifeBridge and the Care First teams, providing them mentorship and programs. But we haven't, because of the pandemic, really, I've only been in the space while it's been finished once. And so we haven't launched the physical manifestation of this, but we'll be launching virtually in a couple of months. So I think you want to add anything on to that?
Yeah, I think that was a great description, Ricardo. As you mentioned, this is the first year, so we'll be selecting our first cohort very shortly. What I think is really unique about this is the pair-provider combination, right? Because there are many other accelerators across the country, but what I've noticed from my experience in working with early stage startups is that they need both clinical validation, and what that entails is typically when you speak with doctors or nurses about new technologies, they really want to understand three things. Number one, does it work? Is it going to improve outcomes? Number two, does it fit into my clinical workflow, or is it going to make my life worse and give me more of a headache? Number three, am I going to get paid for it? So the reimbursement piece is essential for the adoption of new technologies and for startups. So I'm very excited that through 1501 Health, we're going to be able to offer access to clinical validation, but also reimbursement roadmap and mentorship so that these startups can think about their 3-year, 4-year, 5-year plan. The companies that we're looking at from our cohort right now are early stage. These are typically seed funding between $1 to $7, $8 million in valuation, typically have achieved some revenue, but are still early stage and need that guidance to really make it to the next level. And by combining our networks of LifeBridge Health and Healthworks, we hope that we can offer them access to additional customers in the future and really scale, so that by selecting winners, we can show the value of this program. The other thing to mention around the physical space is we think that it's fairly unique in that it offers co-working space and conference rooms, but it also has a model clinic. So we set up a simulated environment for an inpatient room as well as an ambulatory exam room. And my hope is that at some point, maybe later this year, we can have the startup entrepreneurs meet with clinicians and venture capitalists and peer experts in our model clinic to say, here's where my app is going to enter the clinical workflow, here's where the remote patient monitoring will occur, and we can provide them direct feedback. So I think that's something to mention as well about the program.
That's amazing. And I like that partnership. I've seen Nate smile also, and you probably were thinking, had I had all that around when I founded my company, right? So tell us a little bit more about your journey and what would you have liked to have, perhaps that you didn't have when you started yours, or maybe what did you have in terms of support to get you to your success story?
Yeah, no, I think the three things you mentioned, around kind of does it work, clinical workflow, and then kind of reimbursement are, three key things. And anything you can do to accelerate that is huge, right? The first one of does it work? It's kind of the chicken or egg problem. How do you get the first person to agree to test it, to see if it works? And that process for us took years. It was, we started with the single provider practices that were willing to try it out because, why not? And it took many years to kind of go up the totem pole before we got to the 10,000 provider practices, just kind of moving up. And so I think, having the opportunity to kind of get in the door and test things out is a huge, value add. And then, I think the point too, you mentioned reimbursement. I think that took us a long time to figure out, our product worked great, but who cares, right? It needed to, demonstrate where was their budget and where did you help in the ecosystem. And, we were able to kind of create different products that hit different kind of reimbursement pathways. And that took many years of, of going back and forth. And so, getting experts around that, from day one of where do we fit, where's the budget, and how do we get paid for it, I think is it's something you don't really think about at the beginning of healthcare, but it's just as important, when starting a company.
Yeah, interesting. So of course we couldn't have this dialogue here at this panel today without talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, and you already mentioned how it has changed your lives to some degree. And but before we go into that, I just want to remind the audience also to use the Q&A feature. If you have any questions, just click the button there and type it into the window, and we'll see it pop up on the screen here right away. And there's already one coming up, so I'll read that in a second while we go take the next one. So, maybe we'll start with Pratik in this one. When you spoke earlier, you mentioned innovations around telemedicine and remote patient monitoring as examples that really accelerated during the pandemic here. Could you expand on that a little bit for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll share two specific examples, Jürgen. The first is a mobile application for patient engagement called Get Well Loop that we had already been using at LifeBridge for 3 years prior for post-discharge communication with patients to provide them with automated reminders about their follow-up appointments and medication, which resulted in improved patient satisfaction. And we were able to also track reductions in readmissions to the emergency room for the populations that were actively using this mobile automated tool. With COVID, it became really interesting. There were a couple of different use cases that we found where we were able to pivot and use this Get Well Loop tool. So the first was back in the spring of 2020, when we were having our patients getting tested through drive-through testing, we were able to put them on this Get Well Loop so that we can monitor their symptoms while they're waiting for their test results. So in case they need to get escalated, we can use this mobile application to communicate with them. And so we had over 10,000 patients who were enrolled back in the March, April timeframe and found a high level of activation and engagement through this platform. More recently, we have been using it for our employee population across 4 of our hospitals within LifeBridge Health for daily check-ins around symptoms. So it asks you a brief questionnaire. Do you have any fever? Do you have any COVID-related symptoms? You fill it out, and then you get a green check mark, which you need to show when you're entering any of our hospital campuses. And that has been a major effort given our large employee population that the innovation team helped to implement. We have close to 6,000 active employees using the Loop platform and over 110,000 check-ins. We haven't made it a requirement, so you can still do the manual process where you get your temperature checked and answer questions at the front door, but we use the TSA pre-check model. So if you already have downloaded the app and filled it out, then you can go through a shorter line, which actually helps us with reducing infections as well by having less traffic at our entrances. And then most recently, after the amazing news about the vaccines coming out in December, we have been able to use Loop for our employee population to monitor any side effects from the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines as well. So we've had over 4,000 employees who have used Loop and received comments and alerts when typically after the second dose, there tends to be some mild or medium symptoms. So we were able to work with our occupational health department to manage those. So it's been a really great tool for us throughout the COVID experience, through the ups and downs of that process. The second example that I wanted to mention are, again, our community mobile health clinics. I wanted to give a little bit more detail about that. So last summer, we started the pilot program where we took 2 of our buses and converted them into mobile clinics to go out into West Baltimore to see adult chronic patients who have social determinants of health challenges. So they might not have access to transport, or they might be dealing with behavioral health issues or addiction issues. So we sent teams of nurses, social workers, and equipped them with iPads so that they could conduct telemedicine through our virtual hospital. And we were able to see over 300 patients through this 2-month program back in the summer of 2020. And we found it to be very effective in identifying patients with multiple chronic conditions typically hypertension and diabetes, followed by obesity, and many of them had not seen a primary care provider in over a year. We're really able to extend care into the community through this pilot project. And based on the success and the impact, we decided to add new use cases to it. So in the fall, we added, winter of 2020, we added pediatric vaccinations through this mobile clinic program because many families had been delaying their children's vaccinations due to fear of COVID. So by providing them in the community, we were able to increase the amount of vaccinations. And then most recently, again, with the availability of the vaccines here in Baltimore, we are now working with the city of Baltimore and partnering with them to use our mobile clinics to provide vaccines into the community. So I just wanted to highlight those two examples of ways that we use technology and also creative, innovative methods of care delivery to really meet the needs of our patient population.
Great, thanks, Pratik. That was really interesting. Nate, you as in your role as head for EHR at Amalgam RX now, and you talked about interoperability in medical record systems and this strong demand on data, both from clinicians and researchers alike. What kind of innovation have you seen been driven by COVID in your organization?
Yeah, and so I think a lot of it is it's kind of sped up innovation and a willingness to partner a lot more. I think, we probably signed up, a couple of years ago it was 10 systems a year, and this year it was over 200, and a lot of it was the fact that why we didn't directly affect COVID. We do a lot with quality programs and cost management and other stuff. We saw that. Contracting was streamlined of how, now that people are needing to adopt tools quickly, like how do you, work with other vendors? I think, telemedicine was something that people quickly adopted, and they saw kind of the benefits of working with, different tools. And, we were able to go and said, oh, you interact like this, that's a lot easier than, we thought. And so I think we've seen a lot of, good come out of the system of, understanding how do you establish processes, how do you, work. And then I think too, as mentioned earlier in the call, kind of the need of social determinants in mental health. I think people have realized the kind of importance of that. And that is not necessarily within the four walls, of the clinic. And, it sounds great of having kind of the mobile units and otherwise. And I think it's kind of shown that the benefit of kind of the whole, and, a lot of startups, work with, these different aspects. So I'm excited to kind of see, what's possible now that, people are paying attention.
Thanks. Ricardo, there was an interesting question from the audience around the innovation driven by COVID-19 that I want to read real quick. I think I'd be interested in your viewpoint on that. The question is that there's been a lot of momentum in innovation, as we just discussed, but do you anticipate that momentum is also sustainable after the pandemic passes, like getting quicker FDA approvals, et cetera? Do you have any viewpoints on that? Thoughts?
So that's interesting. I don't know about faster FDA approvals, but I welcome it. Right, from a perspective of getting innovations out quickly and have work with a lot of companies through that process, and so know that there are different areas in the FDA, right, who move faster than others and different safety standards. But I'll say the area that is most for us anyway, that has been sort of most disruptive, obviously, as Nate just said, telehealth, right, and virtual health, and probably on two fronts. One, because I think before the pandemic, you saw a lot of folks investing in sort of more brick and mortar type solutions, right? So Walmart and CVS were investing in their health hubs and the Walmart health model. You've seen Walmart now pull back and aren't going as deeply into that model. And so folks who were sort of setting themselves up and folks were talking about to be winners are now questioning the entire business model of what they've been doing. Right at the peak of the pandemic, I think in April, we were seeing 45% of claims volume coming in being from virtual virtual visits. Now, you can play with numbers, and that there was also a compressed amount of utilization during that time, and you're seeing that, and you saw that we've seen that number come back down, but there's still a high level of virtual health happening in the region and in the country. And the trick, I think, and sort of how much of that is going to endure, is taking that virtual health and making it less transactional, right? Do I have COVID? Do I have strep? Can I get a prescription? To more longitudinal, and moving more into a virtual environment where you have let's say virtual primary care that is completely virtual, right? And figuring out then where the touches are. And so I do think the fact that people got a taste, a large group of Americans got a taste of virtual health, and liked it from the satisfaction data that we've seen, I think is it will transform. From a payment perspective, you're seeing CMS and there's legislation in the Maryland State House right now around how you pay for virtual visits, and parity on whether you pay for the same as in-person visits, and I don't know where that'll shake out, right? Because there's as much as you want to drive satisfaction and convenience and access through virtual, and you want to have the business model be able of physicians and other providers to be able to support it. In the end, one of the goals of virtual increasing access is also to make sure that you have a sustainable healthcare system, right? I always say nothing threatens access to care as much as cost. And so how that happens around how we treat virtual care, I think is going to be incredibly important. But I think we are seeing, and we'll continue to see, a lot more folks. Amazon just announced, they announced a few weeks ago, and then they announced that they're setting up shop in Maryland and in DC. Yet a more longitudinal model than like your traditional Teladoc and Amwell, but not as longitudinal as I think we will get to, and in the virtual care space. So that's one that I think will definitely endure.
And I can step in for a sec. I think something, the hype up amalgam, I think something cool that we're doing is you can prescribe an app around insulin titration, and it's FDA approved. And so what used to happen is you'd be prescribed insulin, you take some lab results, you go back to the provider and they would change your dosage and so on. And now, we have an app that you get prescribed, you enter your lab results, then the algorithm can change your dosage depending on your results. And as long as you're within a certain window, you can do that. And because of that, you're saving visits to the provider's office. A1C results go way down because you're within range much quicker, but all of a sudden you have, all these things that are happening outside of the walls that are making, less work for the provider, that are, making it easier for a patient to interact. So I think we're seeing a lot more comfort with kind of technology, on the provider side as well as on the patient side. And so I think there's a ton more on personalized care. When we started, we built a lot of stuff around guidelines that, if patient was 18, then do this. Now it's, if patient, fits one of these million criterias, prescribe this. And so I think we're going to see a lot more cool personalized care, as we get into this stuff.
Yeah, I agree that.
All right. I think we are getting close to time. So what we'll do now is we'll do a quick round robin so you can give us your closing remarks. But I'll weave in one question that came in on the panel. Maybe you can answer that on the fly as we go with the closing remarks, which is, and I think it's mostly to Pratik and Ricardo. One of the members in the audience was really interested what you are doing with 1501 Health, in particular, to engage the innovator community in Prince George's and Montgomery counties, or in the DMV region. So I think they want to find out ways to engage with you. So maybe you can weave that in briefly in your answer. Maybe I'll start with Pratik on closing remarks.
Sure. My closing remarks are optimism and excitement about the next stage of digital health. I think that when we talk about telemedicine, we think a lot about live telemedicine, but we should also think about asynchronous telemedicine, where videos are being recorded and the data is being shared with providers for future analytics. So that's an important area where I think we're going to see growth. Data is a really important part of the equation as we move from fee-for-service to value-based care. and pair-provider collaboration is going to be really important to identify what data is meaningful and partner with technology companies to use AI and predictive analytics to surface actionable insights. With regards to 1501 Health and engaging with the local geography, we are hopeful that we will be able to represent local startups as part of the cohorts, and we will be running this program numerous times. So we're focusing on our first cohort, but later this year, we'll start the application process for next year as well. So stay tuned and look at the 1501health.com website for further information.
All right, Nate, would you go next?
Sure. No, I think from a digital health perspective, I mean, we're just at the beginning, and we're, you know, similar to kind of thinking, you know, Star Trek and the tricorder and all that stuff. Like, there's a lot of really cool stuff coming out, and it's only evolving faster. And so, you know, stay tuned on that. I think, too, it's great that here kind of this collaborations in the ecosystem. I mean, the fact 1501, I mean, you have a payer and provider talking to each other. You know, 10 years ago, that was unheard of. And so I think, you know, people are starting to realize, how do you benefit the community? And I think that, you know, starting a company now, I would get all aboard that if I could. And then, you know, 3, in terms of the Baltimore ecosystem, I think, you know, it was because of that we got started and were able to have a success. And I think it still has a ton of value in the greater Maryland area, you know, a ton of value in health systems and talent and, you know, VC activities. So excited to see kind of what the next, you know, round of, you know, companies look like.
All right, Ricardo, last 30 seconds, bring us home.
Got it. So on Prince George's County and Montgomery County, as echo what Potik said, I'll also say if there are ways of partnership that you think of, you know, we are a regional-based company, and so want to partner more. We partner with incubators and accelerators down in DC, Halcyon. Nothing specific in Montgomery and Prince George's County, but open to it. The second thing I'll say, as my closing remarks, is equity. Equity is it's a shame that it's taken to the pandemic to have equity rise to the level, health equity rise to the level of conversation that, quite honestly, it's been needed for decades. And this particularly, the topic of the day, I wrote an op-ed that was in the Daily Record yesterday of how increasingly digital equity and health equity will be the same. That you will not be able to achieve health equity without achieving digital equity in underserved communities. And so I would say let's all push for digital equity as my last remark.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ricardo, Nate, and Potik, for your insights. And with that, we'll turn it back to Rich so he can continue the rest of the program.
Thank you, Jürgen, and thank you, Potik and Ricardo and Nate, one of our graduates. It's really excited to see these things occurring within the BioHealth Capital Region in Baltimore so that our companies can stay here and go through these programs rather than to have to go to other parts of the country to get the same expertise, which we know we have in spades in our region. And now bringing this collaboration together is just going to make it easier for the future of ANAs of the world to progress more quickly into this commercialization world. So thank you all for what you're doing to build the ecosystem. And thank you, Jürgen, for doing a great job in moderating the last panel. We're going to close today, and rather than talking about just trying to get Prince George's County and Montgomery County involved with Greater Baltimore, we're going to talk a little bit international about other things happening within the region that are very beneficial to the BioHealth Capital Region. And we bring in 2 speakers to close this with some closing comments, talking about international collaboration in digital health. And we have 2 great people that we have selected for this. And one of them may be a candidate to participate in a Healthworks Accelerator program down the road, but we'll talk to Marina more about that later. But we have Laurent Wassa, who is the Senior Business Development Advisor, Life Sciences and MedTech for the Quebec Government Office in New York, and has been a strong partner with the state of Maryland, because there's an MOU between Maryland and Quebec now for economic development exchanges. And Laurent is a frequent visitor to our region, as well as we see him at our booth every year and all of the different exhibits that there are. So Laurent, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you very much, Rick, and also thank you very much to all the organizers, and also to the 49 people still with us. Thank you very much for staying all the way. you are in a great company, and we are in great company. We did enjoy very much those two panels. And yes, based in New York City, always enjoy my time in the office in New York, but not New York centric. We definitely are way down to Maryland. And the two key messages that I want to convey today for all the attendees, and please reach out to me if you think there are opportunities to explore. Number one is that Quebec is open for business in digital health in Maryland, of course in Baltimore and beyond. And number two, Quebec is a unique hub for the future, combining key expertise in biopharma, biotech, medtech, and digital health. And that leads me to a unique company, which we have a great pleasure of being with us this afternoon, and that is Marina, and the company A-Friend Health.
Yeah, thank you, Laurent. And you know, this is one of the things that it goes both ways. Companies that would like to enter the Canadian market, and Canadian companies and Quebec companies who would like to enter the U.S. markets and our region. So I've had an opportunity to do a bio talk with Laurent and Marina, and know a little bit more about them now. And Marina Maskingham is the CEO of A-Friend Health, Canadian digital health company focused on clinical decision support and mental health, and starting with depression, which we heard from the last panel, which was a part of the discussion topic, Marina. So welcome to this webinar, and maybe you could do a brief introduction of yourself.
Sure, thank you very much, Richard. It's a pleasure to join you today. So as you mentioned, I'm Marina Maskingham, CEO of A-Friend Health. We are based in Montreal, Quebec. We are a startup focused on digital health and mental health, and we focus on clinical decision support. So helping doctors to make better decisions in the care of their patients with complex mental health conditions, starting with depression. We think of this in two areas: treatment management, which is to help the physician to understand where the patient is on the disease cycle and what to do next. That product has already been extensively tested in Canada. It is ready for commercial pilots in the US. So we're hoping that's the next stage once the borders open again. We're all very keen to see that happen. And we are also completed development of an AI model for treatment selection. That is about personalizing treatment choice down to the individual patient to match an individual with the right first-line treatment to help them to get to remission faster. And that's always the goal: improving patient outcomes, getting more patients to remission and getting those patients to remission faster.
And, you know, I'd like to pick up on something you talked about when we open up a little bit more, but digital health really enables us to communicate a little bit more effectively throughout the world today, even in spite of the COVID-19 pandemic that we're in today. So you talked about it's been tested in Canada. You'd like to expand it to do some testing in the United States. So what's involved in actually increasing the number of test sites? How do you select them? How do we make certain that we get some test sites in the BioHealth capital region so you get exposure and we get exposed to your technology?
That's a great question. So here in Canada, what we've done is we've worked with both psychiatric centers. So there's two that are very well known in Canada. One is the Institute of Mental Health, which is here in Montreal. So we have tested our tool in a psychiatry setting, and we're actually in discussions right now with a major psychiatry center in the US to take and adopt our technology. But we're also looking for health networks who are serving and providing care through both specialists and family doctors, PCPs, to try the tool in that environment in the US as well. Like you say, we've done this work in Canada. Now we need to broaden our horizons and look to see where we can help patients in the US.
And since you're still early stage, you've had some interesting success and exposure for the company at this time, though, that I'm sure you'd like to talk about. And maybe you could give the webinar participants a little introduction to your partnership with XPRIZE at this time.
Sure, I'd be very happy to. So we are participants in the $5 million multi-year Global IBM Watson AI XPRIZE. So this is a prize that opened in December of 2016. So we've been competing in it for some years now. the purpose of the prize is to apply AI to solve the world's grand challenges. So this is not just a health tech prize, this is fintech, clean tech, robotics, you name an application and field in which AI is used, that industry was represented. We entered with over 700 companies from around the world, and we are now one of the top 3 finalists in the world. And we have had our tech examined by some of the leading experts and judges in the field in the world during the course of this prize. So we've not only had to prove our outcomes, but safety and ethics and really impact in a clinical setting. So I think some of the prior panelists mentioned this, you can build great tech, but you have to see that it fits into the clinical workflow. It meets the needs of physicians and patients. All of that work has gone into the prize, and we're so proud to now be representing not only Quebec, but the whole of Canada as a top 3 finalists in the world in the competition.
Well, good luck in the final decision making, and just making the top 3 is quite an accomplishment. So congrats there, and hopefully you can become the winner in this prize at some point. And Laurent, let's talk a little bit about what the role of your office is to work with companies like Marinas and other companies in Quebec, and what you do to try to help get exposure for what the assets are in Quebec, and then also introduce companies like AFRED to other regions around the United States where Quebec has partnerships.
Thank you, Richard. That's a great point, because we were actually in Baltimore in December of 2019 with some of my colleagues. I had the great pleasure of actually visiting some of the sites, including from some of those participants that were with us in the panels earlier today. And we really intending to come back in person. So it's really a great pleasure to be here, only virtually today, but I wait until we come back and we'll bring some more of those great companies, such as AFRED. What I can mention also is that we're quite proud in Quebec of this computing power we have across Quebec. It's not just Montreal. There's quite a bit outside of Montreal, including in Quebec City. But I would like to mention that Montreal is the home of the AI cluster for Canada. And that talks volume about what's going on in and around Montreal and what it represents for Canada. And number 2, you may have heard of MILA, which is the Quebec AI Institute. One may not know that MILA was actually started in 1993 by someone by the name of Yoshua Bengio. And that speaks volume about how dense, how it goes back to more than 20 years, if not 30 years, with MILA and the Quebec AI Institute, and the ecosystem that has evolved to be really flourished in Montreal and across Quebec in AI health. So I'm really here on the receiving side, on the US border, on the US side, receiving side of those Quebec companies that are champions already in Canada. Some of them may already have a name and be known here in the US, but usually they're not so much. And we intend to bring more on them and helping build a pipeline of collaboration with key stakeholders. And of course, we intend to come back to Baltimore and just do that with you, Rich, the help of your partners and the stakeholders that we met through this great event during the afternoon today. So anyone that is still with us for the 6 attendees, please reach out to me if you think that you have something that you'd like to talk to us about. I'll be happy to engage with you.
Well, thank you very much. You're one of the better global economic development partners that Maryland has had. I'm sure there's more that we can do together in sharing the ecosystems in both of our worlds. And Marina, we only have a few minutes to close right now. So talk a little bit about your future goals and what do you think about the opportunity to expand in the US, and maybe Nate Weiner from Avana and Amalgam RX might be a good partner for you here down in the Baltimore area.
I was thinking the same thing, Rich, as I was listening to them. So one of the things we did do is apply to 1501 to the accelerator program. We have been waitlisted. So we keep our fingers crossed, not that we want to ill wish other startups, but either this year or next year, it's exactly the kind of program that I think helps to give a good landing and entry point into the US market. So that's certainly something we're planning on doing, is participating in US-based accelerators. We are preparing for a clinical trial for our AI model in treatment selection. We have 11 sites. The majority of the sites are actually US-based. So we have a number of sites from the US Department of Veterans Affairs interested in participating in the clinical trial, which is great. And as we said, looking for our first partners and pilots in the US, whether that's with payers or providers to demonstrate really what our technology can do.
Well, thank you, Marina. And I know Poteek is still on the webinar, and so is Nate. And Poteek, if there's anything we do get some international flavor into that 1501, we have a great international candidate here to be considered. So good luck, Marina, on your potential participation in that program. So I'd like to thank both of you. We could have talked a lot more time about this topic and international collaboration opportunities, but I'm sure we can do a follow-up down the road. Good luck to both of you, and we hope to see you in person someday, Laurent and Marina, back in the area, but we will continue to talk virtually to continue this journey into the United States and for companies who would like to enter Quebec. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it's been fantastic today, and I want to bring Michele Whelley back in. I think it's been a very successful webinar, Michele. Congratulations for your vision to put this thing together and asking us to help be a partner with you in that. So I'll turn it back over to you right now.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Rich. This has really been a fascinating 2 hours. And as you said it earlier, we have it in spades. And by we, I mean Baltimore, Washington region. And I hope to collaborate more and more with BioHealth Innovation, as well as all of our panelists in terms of moving this important industry of digital health forward. I want to thank again our sponsors, First National Bank, Olive AI, and TEDCO. For all the folks who are still on the call and registering, please go to our program and get more information about our panelists, about BHI and EAGB, and about our wonderful sponsors. Have a great afternoon and stay in touch. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.